My name is Terrence Glover from Urban and Mind Planning Consultants, and with me is Victoria Colantonio and Dorothy Young, and we're here to present to you little tidbits, information, and useful knowledge about how to be a good student, how to be a good planner, and how to be a good employee. So why don't we start with Dorothy talking a little bit about your background.
I'm Dorothy. I graduated from the Bachelor's of Urban and Regional Planning program at Toronto Metropolitan University in 2023. And my current role at Urban and Mind is Planner and Development Coordinator, and I've been working in this position for 2.5 years, roughly a few months after I graduated. And I will be taking my Registered Professional Planning Qualification exam this spring.
And Victoria, can you give a little bit of background about yourself?
Yep, my name is Victoria. I also graduated from the Bachelor's of Urban and Regional Planning program at Ryerson University in 2021. And I worked at Urban in Mind from 2021 to 2025. I am currently working abroad in Rome, Italy for the past 6 months. And I received my RPP designation from the OPPI in October of 2024.
Great, thank you, Victoria. And I'm Terrence Glover, as I mentioned. I'm the owner and principal planner with Urban and Mind Planning Consultants. Been doing this consulting business for about 11 years now. I graduated from Ryerson University in 1997. I graduated from Mohawk College in the municipal planning technician in 1993. Prior to this business, I was the director of planning and building and development of community planning and development, including building, in the town of Pelham, and then director of planning for the Halton District School Board, senior planner, city of Brantford, and then I went Halton Hills, Burlington, etc. But I have about 31 years of direct planning experience, and about 7 years post-secondary experience. I'm also we'll call it certified. There's no certification in Canada as of yet, but certified in CEPTED as well. So that's our backgrounds. Just to give you a context, we were where you are today as students. We know what you are going through as we went through it, generally speaking, although the time is a little different. But with Dorothy and Victoria, it's more recent than myself. We're creating this video to kind of give you advice on how to be a good planner, how to be a good student, how to be a good employee, as I mentioned. There's little bits of tidbits information here for you to use. There's advice on what to do properly and how to do it. And there's also things not to do. So hopefully you find this information useful to you in your career, both as a student and as an employee, and we'll get going. Let me see what we have here. Okay, so what we hope you take away from this is how to be a successful student. Going to school, sometimes you don't really know what you want to do, but you should apply yourself to your best of your ability to become whatever it is that you want to become. And obviously your majors or your focus may change throughout university, but you should still apply yourself because it will lead to betterment in your life. Not only passing in school, not only getting good grades, but you should understand what is being taught of you, because education is not about getting grades. It's about learning and understanding what's being taught, so you can apply it to other areas in your life that may not even be directly related to your education. It's the logic process that's being taught to you. Understanding the skills that are most useful to your future career. There are some courses, say basket weaving electives, that may be easy to take, but they're not really that useful for you in your career. And if you need marks because you're in jeopardy, that's great. But if you want knowledge, it may be best to take a different course. And that knowledge will lead you to a successful career as opposed to getting a job. How to act professionally, both as a student, as an employee, perhaps a summer student even, what to do and not to do. And then how to find a job. I mean, when I got out of school, it was very tough. I mean, there was a recession and there was provincial downsizing happening for me both times I got out of school, and I had to really be inventive to figure out how to get a job. And I know Victoria and Dorothy have similar situations. We'll give you advice on that because that's very useful as well. And then how to navigate the office environment. Transferring from student to employee in an office is a very different situation, and you act differently at those two. So a lot of it deals with maturity, but there's also some hints in that we can advise you. Um, so we're going to talk about student life first. Then we'll talk about sorry. We'll talk about student life, then we'll talk about the personal development and graduation, and then finding a job and working in the office. So to start this, we're going to let Victoria kick it off and talk about her student life and what she found useful, and hopefully some tidbits of information that you could find useful.
Okay, so we'll get started, Dorothy and I, on some courses that we found the most beneficial to us when we were both in school because we weren't so far apart from each other. So we actually had a lot of the same professors and some similar experiences. So I think one key takeaway that we both realized was really important right off the bat was ethics, because ethics is a huge part of planning in real world and in school scenarios. So having an understanding of ethical practices isn't just exclusive to the planning profession, but also how we can apply them in the industry. So we use them as planners every single day, and using ethics and thinking ethically impacts all of the decisions that we make. So I guess for Dorothy, she can give us her perspective as a new planner, and then I can speak to a little bit of how it's beneficial for the RPP.
And to jump in there, we all went to school and graduated in Ontario, Canada. But what we're saying really can apply anywhere in the world, in any profession. We're speaking about planning, we're speaking about Canadian planning, but it can be applied anywhere. So Dorothy, why don't you continue on with the ethics?
Yeah, so as a new planner, I think that having a foundational understanding of ethical practices is really important, especially when you're entering into the field. You have to be able to identify potential ethical concerns and figure out how to address them. And for me, I would always consult with either my colleagues or Terrence, who oversees the work that I do. And I know that there were a lot of conversations between me and Victoria when it comes to potential concerns. And it's just always good to double check with your colleagues because you are a new planner. You're not going to be an expert on every topic. And, they might have been in the same situation as you have, so they might know how to handle it better than you do.
Victoria, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can build on that also because for me, and I know Dorothy is going through it as well. She's preparing to take her RPP exam. That ethics is really at the core of the RPP exam. And if you are going for your designation, if that's something that you wish to pursue after university post grad, so that's something that is central to the profession, also to the ethics course and exam, because we as planners we go off of a code of conduct, and that code of conduct basically tells us what we can and can't do and the rights and the wrongs of working in this profession and making decisions that have the greatest impact for the greatest amount of people. So that's kind of why we're mentioning that the ethics course that we take specifically at our university, but obviously anywhere, because it is such a core part of the planning profession that policy and legislation can change year to year, month to month, but ethics is always fundamentally rooted in the profession, and those ethics don't change. They're not subject to change. The times change and the policies change, but the ethics stay standard, and that's something that we want to emphasize is really important as understanding when you are in school.
And when you learn ethics in school and you think about ethics in your studies as well as in your profession, it will just come naturally to you. The rule of thumb is if it feels odd, if you're questioning yourself about it, you probably shouldn't do it. That's the easy way to think about it. So ethics is important as in part of your studies, so make sure you pay attention to that. Another thing that's important is law. Victoria, why don't you start off with the law courses?
Sure. So, for me at least, because Dorothy and I had two different experiences, and she can speak to hers, but um, one of the key differences was she actually got to have a mock C of A hearing, and I'll let her speak on that. But I wasn't given that opportunity because I was taking that course during COVID, and we didn't have the opportunity to do the same thing. But on my end, the course did provide a very foundational knowledge that we use on a day-to-day basis of planning policy and different development applications that I kind of took it like not advantage of, but I took for granted at the time because I didn't realize how important it was to research outside of the classroom because I wasn't really grasping key concepts that I needed for real world scenarios. And I didn't realize how fundamental that course was. And I wish that I would have undertaken outside research just beyond what we were being taught in the classroom because at the end of the day you need to take that initiative to learn more, but the policy and the case law that we were studying in that class, now I wish that I would have understood that more at the time because looking back on it, it was one of the most fundamental courses in my opinion. Dorothy can also give her own experience on that.
Yeah, so like Victoria said that I had the mock hearing. That was one thing that really stuck out to me because at the time it was very foreign. It was our first time, um, speaking to a case in front of an audience with a panel, and attending real hearings has made me reflect on how helpful that experience was because I was able to get an idea of these real interactions, and I think that that prepared me for the real hearings.
Okay, and just to clarify for our viewers that aren't in Ontario, a C of A is a committee of adjustment hearing, and that's similar to a zoning review or zoning amendment, but a smaller scale. Okay, so on that note, on law, one of the things that I found very useful is back in the day there used to be a book published called it was the decisions of the OMB per year, and it was every year they had a book of all the decisions that the OMB Ontario Municipal Board at that time made. And basically that's your standard for law for decisions. And as a planner, you can make decisions out of your gut, you can make decisions out of policy, et cetera, but the law is really the decision maker. So when you can see or when you research previous OMB, LPAT, TLAB, OLT policies, which are all different versions of the OMB, Ontario Municipal Board, or the decision maker, a quasi-judicial body that decides these things. You can understand how a decision was made and why it was made, and then you can apply that to any issues or any decisions that you have to make in your job as a planner. So that's why law is so important because it's the basis for every decision that you make. If you want to be a good planner, I mean, if you want to be a bad planner, you can make decisions that get appealed to the board all the time, but I don't think that's the goal of anyone. We want to make good decisions based on solid foundation. And if we know the law and the decisions that are made, we can understand how our decision is to be made. We can make the proper decision. So again, I'll suggest that law is very important to not only get a good mark in, but to understand and do additional research either in school or after you get out of school, continue your research in law because it's always changing. There's always new decisions and it's always applicable to what you do. One of the benefits of being a planner is we do different type of work every day. Every application is different. It's on its own merits and there's different things that would affect it. So continually learn law. Another topic which is useful is software. Dorothy, I think you have some thoughts about software.
Yep. So at least when I was in school, we used various softwares such as ArcGIS, AutoCAD, and R for statistical analysis. And I think that the most important software for our role is ArcGIS. And just having a basic understanding in spatial analysis programs has just been really beneficial in our role. I think Victoria can agree with that. You don't need to be an expert in ArcGIS, but it exists for a reason. And as a planner, knowing how to use those tools is really helpful when identifying features and designations on a property. These details are really important. If you're going to be speaking to these properties, you need to know everything about the property. And it also helps to know where to look for these data sets, either through open data resources, or sometimes municipalities will have a very wide range of interactive maps. And that mainly goes for zoning, but sometimes they'll have other detailed maps as well.
And AutoCAD is also something that you don't necessarily have to know ArcGIS, you don't have to know AutoCAD, but you should be aware of them and have a very, very simple understanding of them so that not that you have to do it, but say you have to edit someone's text on an AutoCAD drawing, you can do that. Not that you're going to draw it yourself. These are software that we use in the planning profession. There's streetscape software, there's other internet software, things that you can learn as well. Every bit of software is useful. But ArcGIS and AutoCAD are the two primary. ArcGIS is primarily used for policy type work, where AutoCAD is used for development type work. I would suggest, though, that you don't become an expert in either. Because as soon as your employer eventually finds out that you're an expert in it, they're going to assign you those tasks because you're the most useful person to do that. Once you're assigned those tasks and you do them well, it's going to be hard to give you other types of work because you're a resource now. You're a technical resource. And that's not really what a planner does. That's more of a technician role. Especially in the private sector where they can utilize you anywhere. Usually public sector, you're in a specific role. But I would get a strong understanding of the software, but not become an expert in it as a planner. Why don't we talk about Studio, because that kind of blends into the software. Dorothy, why don't you take us through some of the studio work that you did at school?
Yeah, so we did use both ArcGIS and AutoCAD for our studio courses, and a little bit of SketchUp actually, as well as Adobe Suite programs such as Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. And I think that the studio classes were really useful, aside from developing those technical skills. Majority of the work in the studio courses were group work, so you really had to learn how to collaborate with other people. And that's what we have to do every day as planners. There's consultants, city staff, clients. You have to cooperate with everyone. And you learn most of the application and thinking outside of the box when you're presented with these issues on the job. But I think the studio course really prepares you to handle situations as well as learning how to think about them. And you also learn how to work with your clients and within their best interests, because our studio courses were client-based, I think, for third and fourth year. I think Victoria had the same as well. So maybe she can speak about her experience with the client studio.
Yeah, and when you talk about client studios, what do you mean by that?
So we had clients, but we weren't paid consultants. We were just student consultants. So we were just working alongside them, giving them ideas. Obviously, since we're just students, they're not going to take our word for it. It was just more of a new set of eyes to look at a proposal.
So like a student project on real world situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's very practical.
Yeah.
Situations in certain, I worked on two, one in third year, one in fourth year. And in fourth year, I worked on one to do like a redevelopment of Bathurst Street from Lawrence to Avenue Road, because they were looking into doing kind of not really a master plan, but they were just looking to do like a little neighborhood plan there. And they had us do, the city of Toronto approached us and we were their client. We were meeting with counselors and we were giving them demographics and giving them ideas of what they could put in that little corridor there. And sometimes you're actually working on projects that are going somewhere, and they just, instead of paying one of their own planners to do it, they're getting a group of students on board and just seeing what ideas exist and what resources they have, and using us basically as the resources. And we actually presented to a panel of counselors for that. So it also gets you exposed to some potential employment opportunities in the future if you keep in contact with the clients that that worked with you. That we actually had a couple. We had Mattamy Homes. Like we had some bigger ones too when I was in school. So it was really beneficial to keep those connections as well.
So I think what I'm hearing is from the studio courses, pay attention to the technical aspects of them, pay attention to the networking opportunities of them, and learn how to coordinate with your peers. I think that's the biggest thing. Obviously, you have technical drafting and things of that that will help you in terms of your career. And you don't, again, as a planner, you don't do the drafting, you don't do the design work until you get higher up. But even then, you'll instruct people how to do it, technicians and that. But as a planner, you should understand how it's done from a technical point of view, so that when you do instruct someone to do some technical work for you, you know what you're asking to do, and also the timelines it's going to take to do it. Okay, let's talk about electives. What elective did you find very useful at school for your career?
I took site planning, and I know we just talked about how studio class was so great for learning to collaborate with your peers, but site planning was more of an individual project. Um, and in studio, you would be writing a justification report with your entire group, and the group might consist of like 10 people. And so when you have one report and 10 people, you're going to split that up into smaller sections. But in site planning, you had to do it all by yourself. The entire planning justification report, the proposal, the drawings, the policy, analysis, everything. And I think that class really, really, really prepared me for this role, because in our day-to-day, we're responsible for our projects. And especially when we're writing these reports, we can talk with our colleagues, but ultimately you're responsible for your own project. And I think that while a justification report might seem daunting for just one person to write all on their own, this class really helped give you a good idea of what to expect when you're doing it on your own. And you were able to gain some good feedback from your peers through discussions and as well as the lecturer. And another thing I would add is that in these justification reports, we have to understand the hierarchy of policies and how they might restrict or enable the proposed development when we're explaining why this development should happen. And we also have to consider other documents such as provincial guidelines that might apply specifically to different properties like agricultural properties. And knowing where to look is really helpful. And I think this class really prepared me for that.
Yeah, when you get out into the real world, I guess the employment world, you'll be doing site planning and justification on your own.
Yeah.
And whether it's government side or the private side. Private side, you're writing the justification reports and doing the site planning. The public side, you're reviewing it to make sure it's done accurately and correctly and is rational. So planning justification is probably one of the most important things you will end up doing as a planner. There's obviously project management and policy work in that, but from a development point of view, the planning justification report is one of the few things that has to be done by a registered planner. The management that can be done by many different types of people and different professions, but that's one of the things that must be done by a planner. So it's very important to learn that skill. Victoria, you took a different course in elective?
Yeah, I took development feasibility and analysis, and I think that one for me was super helpful, especially if you're leaning more towards the development side of things, like development coordinator, project manager, because as we talked about, there are several different branches of planning that you can go into. So I think that one was also very beneficial to get an understanding of what goes into a development, the hard and the soft cost, where to find, like where to research and where to look for the documents that are going to give you the costs for estimating a budget for a proposed development. Also, I wasn't super technically skilled in Excel, and this one really helped me embedding formulas and learning just how to utilize Excel for what it's actually meant to do, because my knowledge was very beginner, and this course really helped me also with the developing a pro forma for developments. This is actually a template that I still use to this day when I'm looking at budgeting for development, which isn't something that I need to do on a daily basis, but when it does come up, at least I have that template, that foundation. So I thought that one was super beneficial.
And one thing that I took it after post-secondary. I took it as a separate course, but project management. I found that very useful because not only did it allow me to lay out a project, say that what I'm doing, but allow me to create my thought process in any task, whether it's finishing a school assignment, whether it's building a deck on my house, whether it's doing a high-rise development planning process. It's the same techniques apply. So it's a logic-based package of information that you can use. So I would definitely suggest if there's a project management course available to take that as well. It'll really help you long term. Okay, so some of the tidbits that I'm going to give you are just from what I observed when I was going to school as well as after. So one thing that I found very useful is when I was in school, get notes from students the year ahead of you. Whether you got to buy them a for a beer or something like that. Their notes, although not directly necessarily related to the course you're taking, it gives you the ideas of what's being expressed in that course, what you should be reading, what you should be understanding, and you can use that to summarize so you can focus in on what you need to learn for that course. It's almost a secondary teacher for you. And in some cases, it'll be a direct translation from what they did to you did. So that thought process will also already be there for you. Very, very useful. What I did is I got 3 people's notes. So because you never know if you're going to get someone who's not that smart or someone who's really smart. So 3 people will give you the summarized version. And the highest common denominator is what you want there. The other thing is if you're finding you're having trouble at all at the beginning, say the first quarter of the course, get a tutor right away. Find someone who can help you. Don't wait. If you wait till like mid-term or whatever, it's too far gone. You're going to be in trouble. Get a tutor right away. There's never been a problem with overstudying or overlearning. There's always been a problem with underlearning. Do extra homework, do extra questions, especially in math and science. I had a statistics class, and math at that time wasn't my strongest suit. Excuse me. But then I learned I do the questions that are asked of me for part of my study homework, and then I would do all the other questions that weren't asked of me. And it wasn't because I was keen or anything like that. It's because I needed to learn this, so I would pass the course A. Because again, math wasn't at that time wasn't my strongest skill. But because I did all these extra questions, math became my strongest mark or my strongest course. So it's really important to not only do the questions to get your marks, but learn what you're doing in math and science because you will be applying them in your future career. Studying in groups, I mean, that's fine, but it often leads to social gatherings rather than actual study work. So if you can find a group that you're actually going to work at, that's great. But I never found that they were overly useful because they would focus on the loudest person in the room, or they would be social gatherings. And passing a test at school is very different than working in the field. You can be book smart, but you can be dumb as a stump in the field. You need to not only get a good mark to pass the course and get good grades, but you need to learn the content that we do. And you'll see I'm regurgitating that over and over again. Learn the content of what you're being taught. Don't just go through the motions, because what you're learning will be applied later in life in your employment. And the better you are at your employment, the more you go up the scale, the higher you be promoted, etc. There are people that you'll find out when you get into the field that the people that just clock in at 8 and leave at 5, whatever, and they don't really care what happens. They just shuffling paper and that. But if you want to be an effective, good planner, learn your trade, learn what you're being taught, and you'll just by your nature you'll be a good planner. All right, let's talk about professional development a little bit here. Victoria.
Yeah, so definitely some things that we developed as some ideas for your professional development were volunteering, working part-time, summer employment, those kinds of things. And Dorothy and I are both going to be speaking to those because we did participate in a lot of let's say, extracurricular professional development opportunities that aren't really necessarily required, but are good in order to get your name out there and to also continue with your education on the off season of school in the summer or even during the school year. So I'll let Dorothy start because one of the first things that we're going to talk about is research assistant, which both of us did. So I'll let Dorothy start with that one.
Yeah, so my research assistantship was during the school year actually. And the role consisted of collecting data on the Toronto Green Standards and submissions using those statistical forms. And I learned a lot more about the technical details in development practices that weren't specifically focused in my other classes. For example, my studio classes never touched on any of the Toronto Green Standards, so that was completely new to me.
Yeah, so for mine, I worked at TMU Center for Urban Research and Land Development. And when I was working there as a research assistant, we were working primarily on the Toronto Real Estate Board listing. When they were being published, we were doing analyses on them, comparing them to other provinces, looking at rentals, new builds, different statistics of who's buying what, and analyzing the market, putting together some figures for the publications because we would release one every month. And that, for me, I did that for about a year, but I started in the summer, which was a great way to continue my education because also at the time it was COVID, so everybody was in lockdown, and I was actually able to work in the summer in the field between third and fourth year that not many people had that opportunity to do, which is a great thing. So if your school does offer research assistant positions, that you can work on the off season and during the school year, because in my situation, I was able to continue it throughout the school year on a part-time basis, but having that knowledge when I wasn't consistently going to class and taking notes because it was summer, that really helped me when the year started up again, because I was keeping on top of the news and the market and just basically facts that pertain to my field, and I was staying current and updated.
Yeah, it's important, and that leads into Terrence's tidbits of useful knowledge. So, as Victoria was just saying there, it's important to stay within your field or get experience within your field. When I got out of school, other people were getting jobs in factories, making like, well, back then it was making like $15 an hour, which was great back then for someone just out of school. I held out and I found a government program that paid me $5 an hour, which was minimum wage back in the day. Shows you how old I am. Anyways, everybody laughed at me because they're like, "Oh, you're making $5 and I'm making 15." I got direct experience in my field, placed in a conservation authority. They're working at a factory. I'm working in the field now. They're not. So it's important to stay in the field, to learn what you have, and to be able to express to yourself, to a future employer, that, yeah, I'm interested in this. I'm continuing in this field. I'm learning about it. I'm active, as opposed to I'm working at a restaurant or a clothing store and not really in the field anymore. You can get experience in your field. If you can't find a job in your field, then volunteer. You can talk to community associations and see if they need help. Real estate agents sometimes need planning help for research. You can volunteer this time if you can't get an actual job. And worst case scenario, just take a summer course or take a continuing education course. The purpose is when you go to apply for a job, whether it be a summer school job or it would be an actual graduation job, you need to show the employer that you're engaged in this field, you're passionate about it, and you're continuing as best you can within the field. I've had people before apply to jobs for me, and they graduated a year ago, and I said, "What have you done since then?" They're like, "Well, I've worked in a fashion industry." So what have you done in the field? And like, "Well, nothing, because I've graduated." And thank you very much. I'll go to the next person who is passionate or who does have the experience, or someone who just graduated perhaps because they haven't messed around for a year. So it's important to stay within your field, and this is when you start to become the professional that you need to be. So on that note, let's talk about personal development. Dorothy, do you have some tidbits of information for us?
Yeah, so I think that taking a variety of classes will expose you to a lot more topics that you might be interested in. You might have an idea of what you're really passionate about, such as housing, but you might take a transportation course and you realize that your passion for housing extends to accessible transit, and that might be a topic that you might want to explore in future studies or ask a professor to join their research. Um, and yeah.
Okay, Victoria?
Yeah, bouncing off that, also studiousness. So whether you're passionate about a subject or it's something that you're not really super interested in, but you obviously need the marks, you need to pass the course. It's super important to be on top of your studies throughout university, because even though the workload might seem super overwhelming, it's really going to benefit you in the long run, not necessarily doing your homework, but the skills that you learn in terms of time management and task prioritization that you're learning throughout university, because some of us are balancing 4 courses, 5 courses at a time. Some people are also working. Some people have families. Some people have, they have other obligations outside of school. So when you're focusing on your studies and you're honing your study skills, you're also adopting new skills that you're not realizing, but then when you enter the workforce, you're able to prioritize tasks because you were able to do that during school. So, not to say that the homework is going to follow you into the workforce, but the skills that you learn from being studious, from paying attention in class, but also applying that to your continual education, because you want to also continue with being curious, being studious, and making sure that you're staying on top of changing policy, changing legislation, because your studies never really stop. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But I think one of the key takeaways of studiousness is it's when you're studying, the most important thing to remember is you're not studying to memorize content, but you're studying to really understand the content. So you're not sitting there and trying to remember a list of bullet points. You're sitting there and trying to understand, how am I going to apply this in the real world one day? Because it's ultimately something that's important and you need to understand and not just memorize it.
And that's the nice thing about many urban planning courses, is that they're direct education to the field as opposed to a general arts degree or something like that. This is what you're learning to do. One of the things I'll add in there, one of the Terrence's tidbits information is do not, and I repeat, do not place anything on social media that you wouldn't want a future boss to see and therefore judge you on. It could be 10 years earlier or whatever, but social media is a great place to communicate with friends and that, but be mindful that many firms, especially larger firms, cities and that, will look at social media from your past and see what kind of character you have. So be very careful with social media. It's a double-edged sword nowadays. Okay, so now we've gone to school. We know what to do in school. We know what courses to take that are important to us. We know how to act as a student in professional and personal development. All right, we're graduating. All right, we've graduated now. So let's talk about graduation. So Dorothy, any thoughts about your transition or the transition from student to graduation?
Well, I know that myself and many of my classmates were feeling quite intimidated and overwhelmed within our last term before graduation. And that's okay. It's likely that this is the first time in your life that you don't know for sure what you're going to be doing or where you might even be after the summer is over. And I think you can also look at it as an exciting time in your life, because now you actually get to choose what you want to do, not just do mandatory courses. It's kind of like a never-ending elective that you get to decide. Um, and you also, I think one thing that you need to keep in mind between transitioning from being a student and going into the workforce is that the quality of your work is no longer just for a grade anymore. You're going to be responsible for a lot more, and you're going to be held accountable for whatever you put out there.
Victoria?
Yeah. So building off of that, so the next step would be, because you're in this big unknown, is to prep for actually looking for a job. So for some people, that means they're going to start looking as soon as possible. And honestly, I think that's the best way to go. Dorothy and I, both of us started applying to jobs super early before graduation, because then at least you can tell companies, recruiters, like, I will be graduating. So if you don't need people right now, maybe you'll need them in a month from now. My name's already at the top of the list, as opposed to people who start applying after they graduate. So it's always good to be prepared and to take initiative. So it's also important, though, that you know what the job market looks like. Because if the job market is not looking good, then it's better for you to start applying faster rather than saying, oh, maybe next month it'll be better. Start applying right away. And I can't even tell you, and I'm sure Dorothy has the same experience, how many rejections that you will get, because that's the way it is. Because you're not only competing against the people that you're graduating with, you're competing with people in the year graduated the year before or 2 years before who are also applying for the exact same jobs as you. Do you have an advantage? Not really. The only advantage you have is taking initiative, because everybody's in the same boat. Everyone's fighting for the same positions now. So that also falls into building realistic expectations. So, not to say that you will fail or you will not get the first job you apply for, but you need to be realistic and know who your competition is. And you just need to, the best thing that you can do is take initiative and say, listen, I know maybe you're not looking now and I'm not graduated yet, but I will be. And you put yourself out there.
So one of the things that I did, so to give you a background, I went to college every summer through college and university, and even between, I worked in the planning field. So I had a very diverse and strong resume. But at the time I graded, it was a recession, and then there was a provincial downsizing, and they laid off a bunch of provincial people that then took jobs at cities, et cetera. So there wasn't a lot of new jobs available. And I was lucky to get, it was all contract jobs, a 1 year, 6 month, 3 year contracts or something. So I went from contract to contract to contract to get employment. You have to be willing to relocate anywhere to get that experience. The experience is the most important thing to get when you get out of school. And then you have to be flexible on your pay. Obviously, you have to survive, but don't expect huge money to begin with. That will come over time as you learn your trade. And the role, as long as it's related to planning, you can apply it to planning. It's useful. When I was in school, during school, and actually from college all the way to university, anytime I saw a private consulting firm or a public agency, I would get their information, their contact person, their address, and I'd write it into a little book. Every year I would add more and more to that. And every summer, probably around February, I would apply to everybody I had in the book. By the end of university, it was 400 people, about 200 in the US, 400 in Canada, and there was a couple international. And I would just send out resumes to everybody. Obviously, back in my day, it was letter and fax machine, but you guys can probably do by email. But get a database of possible employers, send them out. I've had friends that were, I would call it better planners than I would have been, or I am. They were very selective. They didn't want to move out of Toronto, or they didn't want to work for anybody but these 10 firms. And everybody wants to work for those 10 firms, and everybody wants to stay wherever they are. And those are the people that don't get jobs in the field because they're going against everybody else 2 or 3 years ahead of them, or going to from other experienced jobs to the job that are going to beat them out. Take whatever job you can to get the experience, and then you could come back to whatever city where you want once you get that experience. Okay, so Victoria, let's talk about preparing for the job hunt.
Yeah, so actually, that was something I wanted to build off of what you just said, of just blasting your resume out to everybody. That connections and networking is super important when you're looking for a job, especially right out of university. And one of the strongest resources that you could use is relationships with your professors, with your GAs, your grad assistants, your TAs, with even the clients that came into your classes for the client-based studio, because ultimately those people are very important in establishing connections for you, because maybe they have a friend of a friend or a colleague or somebody that they know that they are searching for a job and they can recommend you. So it's also super important to make those connections and not just lose them after university. Because if you did have good relationships with, I have a couple professors that I have on LinkedIn that repost student jobs for all the students that follow them on LinkedIn. And I think that's super helpful because they're helping us. They're not doing it for themselves. They're helping us. So keeping in contact with your professors, even if it's just through a platform like LinkedIn, is an excellent one to make and maintain connections and to network because you're reaching out professionally to people. That was also really big when I was searching for a job because LinkedIn is, at the end of the day, a professional network. So you know that you're not going on someone's Facebook or Instagram. It seems a little bit more personal. You're going on their LinkedIn. It's meant for that purpose, to reach out, to message, to put your resume out there. And that really, really helps with the job hunt because you're also making it a little bit more personal. You're putting a face to the name and you basically have your resume on your profile. So instead of somebody opening up, a Word document or searching through in their mail folders, it's right there. They can click on your profile, see what you graduated from, when you graduated, what you're interested in. Boom, you can have a connection instantly. So super important.
Another thing to add to that is don't just rely on these employment resources. As an employer, you wouldn't believe the number of resumes and applications I get for jobs where people aren't qualified or they're not desirable for some reason, and I get flooded with them. And some of the good candidates actually get lost in that flooding. So if they stand out to me another way, in addition to say LinkedIn or whatever, there's a better chance that I'll see them as opposed to just blending in with the numbers there. So don't rely on just one source. Be creative. And then one thing my father always told me is if you don't apply, you don't have the opportunity of saying no. Right? So you don't even have that opportunity. But if you do apply and you decide you don't want it, you can always say no. But at least you got an offer. Sorry, Victoria or Dorothy.
Oh, yeah. So also another thing that I wanted to talk about with connections, and I'm going to transition it to Dorothy at this part here, because we both are partaking in the mentorship program at our university. This is going to be my third year partaking. It's going to be Dorothy's first. However, Dorothy was on the other side of it as a mentee. So she's going to speak to that experience and how that helped her.
Yeah, my mentor was maybe 2 years ahead of me, so she already had some experience in the planning field. But we were close enough in age where she was just in the same position as I was, where I was looking for a job. I was dealing with transitioning from the school setting into the professional office setting. And it was very helpful to just have someone be able to give you advice on, again, the transition, but also throughout the job search. So personally, my sessions were focused a lot on finding a job and doing mock interviews. That was really helpful doing mock interviews. And my mentor was also willing to look over my resume and cover letters, and she gave me a lot of constructive feedback on where I could improve. So I think it was really helpful to just get that kind of constructive feedback, but then also get a good idea of what to expect as a new planner and maybe even what to expect during the interviews.
Okay.
Yeah. And being on the other side of that as a mentor, that's something that you can't directly, hire your mentee, but you can help guide them and tell them how you did it and how you were successful and give them your own little, tidbits of knowledge that they can use in finding a job. So I think that that's also something super beneficial if your school has a program like that to partake after, because then you can impart your wisdom on others, and also to partake in as a student because you can take that knowledge from the alumni who have been through it and can give you, their own tips.
And as Terrence's tidbits of useful knowledge. Well, most students are young people. Don't let your youth and immaturity be confused with your energy and excitement for the profession. You're in an adult role now as a planner. You need to act as an adult. You can still have fun and you can show passion for it, but uh, check your immaturity. And not because you are immature, but you're young and you're dealing with people who are 10, 20, sometimes 30 years older than you. They were where you are and they know what you're feeling, but your role as an adult when in the office. Um, Try not to get involved. This is my personal thoughts here. Try not to get involved in political groups unless that's the path you want your career to take. Um, Not everybody will believe in the same political thoughts as you, and some people will judge you on that. It's best to stay impartial. You can believe what you want and support what you want, but stay impartial publicly until maybe you're established. It could be detrimental to your career, or it could be very positive if you're going in that direction for your career. Um, Also, when you get out of school, you're going to feel successful. You're going to feel like you graduated and the world's at your oyster, right? But reality check, you're too young, really. And young, I don't mean age, I mean too young in your experience to really form good opinions of planning. You can have your opinion, but I would phrase it more as a suggestion or theory to your bosses, whoever, unless you're specifically asked what your opinion is. But you're dealing with people who have 20 or 30 years more experience than you, who've been through this and have lived experience, and you don't have lived experience. You have academic experience. So how do you form a useful opinion against someone who has this lived experience? Not that your opinion isn't good, it doesn't matter. Just be mindful of who you're speaking to and who you're giving advice to when you're talking about your opinion. Um, yeah, so you can offer a suggestion or theory of what you think the conclusion or strategy should be, and then your peer, your employer will confirm or deny that strategy. Thereby, you'll develop a repertoire with your superior that yeah, that's a good thinker. He or she's a good thinker in planning, or you know what, I need to work on that with that planner because they're not getting it properly. That's what I suggest to develop those skills and phrase your opinions as. Okay, after graduation. So, who's talking about this one? Someone, Victoria, why don't you give us your opinion on after graduation?
Sure. So I'll share this one with Dorothy as well if she wants to jump in. So we already kind of touched on the continual job search and our connections and networking and how those are all very important to make sure that you're maintaining even after post grad. Say, you're 1 year post grad and you're still searching. So continue to establish connections and network, and don't give up on your job search. Don't become it's very discouraging sometimes, but if you give up, then you're giving up your opportunity at the end of the day. But I think another important thing that Dorothy and I have discussed was continual education. And like you said as well, Terrence, that when you're looking to hire somebody who maybe has a gap in their resume, that after they graduated, they didn't do anything for a year. If you heard somebody say, no, I haven't done anything in a year, but I took a course in the meantime, or I've attended some networking events for a planning institution, because in Ontario, there are several planning institutions and different networking events that you can attend, different seminars and webinars that for students at times are free. So to take advantage of those things, especially one of the more beneficial ones that Dorothy and I find especially the past few years with all the new policy that comes out, is law firms will give really good webinars on new policy and legislation. So just to keep up on your education so that when you do ultimately enter the field, you're not behind because you haven't kept up to date on anything from when you graduated. So that was something that we talked about with just continual education and how that's super important, and how to take advantage of the institutions in your province, state, even country, because everywhere has the planning institutions. We have the CIP, OPPI, ULI that all offer at student rates, at non-candidate rates, that you can take part in so many different events and continue your education and show people, your potential employers, that you are still passionate, you are continuing your education, and you are still up to date on current events and current policy and any changes that have happened in the planning world. So I think that's most beneficial to do.
And Victoria, just on that, I would say that those, we'll call it social engagements, webinars, things of that nature, unstructured or unaffiliated, they're useful. They're great for your self-learning, but they're not great on a resume per se. You need structured academic courses to show that you look at, I'm dedicated. I'm actually taking a course at university, post-secondary level, whatever, as well as doing this other stuff. But if you're just attending webinars, I mean, anybody can attend a taxi driver or a construction worker just attend a webinar. What makes you different? But if you're actually enrolled in the course, that is a different, and that's showing that you are interested in progressing in the career.
It's true. It's true.
Dorothy, any thoughts on that, or did Victoria cover them all?
I think Victoria covered them all.
Okay. So again, my tidbits information here is when you're looking for a job and you're out of graduation, be prepared to do or move wherever necessary to get the appropriate employment, to get the appropriate skills that you need, so that you may be working, well, you will be working the bottom of the barrel. You're the lowest peg on the totem pole here. You're going to do jobs that no one else wants to do. You may be able to do fun jobs if your boss allows you to, but you're just there to get experience. It suggests stay at your employer for a minimum of 2 years to show you have consistency to you. Then you can learn certain things, unless it's not a useful career. You need something that's productive in planning. And I think I mentioned this before. If not, I'll say it now. But I had people who would only apply to the 10 best employers. And I would apply to 400 different employers. And for every 100 I applied to, I got one interview. And for every 2 or 3 interviews, I got one job offer. So you have to think outside the box, and you have to be willing to accept what others won't accept to start. From there, you will grow, you will expand, you will get where you want to be, where others will not have the opportunity to grow, to expand, or even be in the field. Okay, so that's one of the key things I'm going to mention to everybody. Okay, so all right, we got out of school. We're looking for a job. We got our first job. Let's talk about what we do on our first job, the first 30 days. Victoria, want to talk about that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to hand this one off to Dorothy because she's had that first 30 days experience a little bit more recently than I have, of the first job right out of school. So I'll let her take over for this one.
Yeah, that's true. I think that it's really important to understand and acknowledge that each office will operate differently. So it's good to understand what the office dynamics are, because some might be more serious and others might be more casual, and you want to be a valuable team member to your company. So you want to show your employers that you're worth keeping after probation is over. And learning the office dynamics is important because you can figure out who you should go to for questions, and not just one person, because there might be an expert in housing on your team, or there might be someone who's more knowledgeable in understanding engineering drawings. So just knowing who is knowledgeable in what is also really helpful. And it's also really helpful to learn from the behavior of the people that work around you. So, just asking them questions and observing their behavior. You can learn a lot through observing people's behavior. And for me, it was learning to speak to clients and knowing how to say, I don't really have the answer for you right now. Let me do some research, discuss with some colleagues or my manager, and I'll get back to you on that. And, just listening in on your colleagues' phone calls to clients and taking note of the tone and the words that they're using when they're speaking to clients and making note if they speak a little differently to clients and versus city staff versus consultants. I just learned a lot through listening to discussions about projects between my colleagues, really.
Okay. Anything else on 30 days, Victoria, or do you want to talk about 90 days now?
I can talk about 90 days.
Okay, so you've got your 30 days under your belt, you're done your probation, now what?
So now I think is when you start applying what you learned in school and what you've learned in those first, now that you're in your first 90 days, in the first 30 days, and then some. So the first basically 3 months we're looking at. So we did have that foundation from university about interpreting policies, but that doesn't mean that we're going to immediately understand every single policy that we read. So now you're learning about how to apply that learned policy in real world settings. So you learn the office dynamics, you learned kind of your position in the team, and now you're going to start applying the knowledge that you learned in university. And we also want to make sure that we're reviewing existing and pending policies so that I'm speaking specifically for private development planning consultants, that we're up to date on the policy and any changes, because ultimately our clients are relying on us for the most recent information. So when we have clients coming to us and they expect us to be experts in our craft, we need to make sure that we have a good grasp on the knowledge that we obtained in university and also building on that knowledge. So,
Victoria, I'll just jump in. It also applies to public. People are coming to you as you are the gatekeeper, you are the expert for the city, deciphering this information. So as public or private, policy is very important to keep up on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also this is the time to observe. This was something that Dorothy and I talked about. It's observing how different consultants interact with each other as well, because we're always working with so many moving pieces here. We have engineers, we have architects, we have conservation, then we have, geotechnical, transportation. We have so many different team members, and now we're kind of honing in on who does what, how this affects my work, and how I need to coordinate with these people to impact my work. So you're figuring out the domino effect. So who needs this in order to start their job? What do I need in order to start my job? So you're learning of how all the pieces of the puzzle fall together, which we didn't really learn about in school. You don't learn about, oh, well, before you do anything, you need the site plan. We were told, here's the site plan and do a planning justification report. So now you have to understand that if I'm not doing the site plan myself, somebody else has to do it. I have to wait for that person to be done. Do I need to put pressure on that person so that that can be done so my work can start? Because now the client's upset with me that the work's not getting done. So that's when you kind of realize how everything is working together and how you fit in and how you need to start solving those problems, that it's not only you're not working independently of other people. You're still working in that studio environment that we learned in school, that we're all working on the same project, hoping for the same outcome, but who needs to do their work first so that the next person can do their work.
And that's great, Victoria. Very important information. I was privileged to have the college work experience and then university experience. So I was able to learn firsthand kind of where different people played, where if you come right out of school, it would be difficult and you'd have to learn it very quickly. So my advice to give you for your career, for everybody's career, is to be a good planner. You're not a paper shuffler, right? You're not an interpreter. You are a problem solver, and your job is to figure out how to make good planning as defined by the courts. Good planning means a good design, good social aspects, good financial aspects, good engineering aspects, interactions with everything. And to be that, you really do need to learn. Again, you don't need to do, but you need to learn everybody else's job around you. You need to learn what an engineer does, how they do it, what they look for. You look for a policy planner. What are they looking for? You need to look at building an architect. How are they building? What are the laws they have to use in building that would affect your site plan? Say, landscape architect, SEPTED, transportation engineer, civil engineer, coastal engineer. There's all different types of engineering that all of them play a part in planning. And if you know their job and what they're expected to do and how they do it, again, not that you have to do it yourself, you're not trained that way, but you can learn their jobs in terms of that aspect. Ask questions and figure it out. Because when someone says, I can't get this report to you in 2 days, or I can't come to that conclusion, you're like, oh, wait a second, no, that doesn't make any sense to me. Many times in my career, to the chagrin of many of my colleagues, I've challenged them to say, look, I don't know if what you're telling me is correct from my limited point of view. Can you explain to me? And through that explanation, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I see it your way, Terrence. I'll do it that way. And I get things moving. And a lot of times the planners that I come into contact with the municipalities and government, they don't get things moving. They pass it on to someone, let someone else comment on it, and then whatever they get back, they kind of respond to it. Instead of learning it, regurgitating it, and saying, this is what the answer is, go back to that traffic consultant service, say, this is what my thoughts are. Do you agree with that? Can we get past this issue and move on with the development? Anyway, so it's very important to become a wholesome planner by learning other people's jobs. Be professional and be on time, be interested in what you're doing, and do the best at it you can. You may hate your profession. It's probably not the profession you should have got into then. maybe go back to education, get a master's in another degree that's an offshoot of planning that you really do like, because this is what you're going to be doing for the next 35 years of your life. Do not anticipate the end of a workday. I don't know how many times I could tell this to young planners or young professionals, and they see it as criticism oftentimes. Come in 5 to 10 minutes early. Leave 5 to 10 minutes late as a regular schedule. You'll be noticed that you're the one coming in early and you're the one coming late, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. And what is 5 or 10 minutes to you in a workday? But it does so much for saying what type of person you are, what type of employee you are. I used to work at a municipality where 4:30, you don't go out in the parking lot because you're going to get hit, because everybody scrambles to their car and leaves. I was one sitting at my desk, and my boss was always, why are you here? And I'm like, well, I'm just wrapping stuff up. I got noticed. And it's only 5 or 10 minutes a day. It doesn't really make a big deal. You're young people. You often you don't have a family. You don't have obligations. You don't have all this other stuff. Spend the time now developing yourself as your career. Be open to criticism. Do not take it as an attack. Some people may present it as attack, but look at it as constructive criticism. If they're telling you something that's negative, there's probably a reason why they're saying it to you, and you should probably try to improve that aspect of you. Sometimes it's hard because it's human nature, is you are who you are, but do your best, because this is the professional world. And sometimes people are just jerks and they want to tell you something just because whatever reason they feel good about themselves for putting you down. Take it as constructive criticism. Know that person's a jerk, but try to improve yourself nonetheless. Work as though the company is yours. It's your money on the line. It's your reputation on the line. And when you approach it from that angle, you will do the best job you can do, because if you're thinking that it's your money, you will do the best for your money. If you're thinking, it's someone else, it's taxpayers' money, whatever, I'll just do my job. You're a bureaucrat. You're not a good planner. You're just someone there filling a void. Be a good planner. That's what we want out there. Never speak poorly of anyone. It will get back to the people. And it also puts you in the light of your critical, non-cooperative type person. It's best if you're in a group situation and someone's asking to agree to an opinion that's negative, just be a wallflower and just nod or something like that. Like, don't ever agree to it or speak poorly of anyone. And be careful what office cliques you join. Cliques often spread negative energy and complaining energy, and it's very contagious. You get sucked into that political environment in the office, and it's hard to get out of. So it's best just to stay away from that. Let cliques be cliques, and you be the side of it. That's the advice I can give you from the office. All right, so now I'll speak to it. You're in there, you're working, your first couple of years are done. what's important after your first couple of years. So basically you've established yourself, you got through probation, you've learned the basic ropes. In my opinion, you're not a professional. You're not super knowledgeable until about 5 years into the role you're doing, whatever it may be, and you're an expert after 7 years. So you should think in those terms. You may be great, you may know everything, but you're not perfect. And you have to cook in the oven a little bit more. So 5 years and 7 years, I would say, are targets to shoot at. Think about your independence. Think about financially, personal, professionally, where's your next steps from here? You establish your career. Now you can start thinking about other things in your life and how you want to expand them. Mind you, you can't forget about your career because you're still working. You want to be promoted over time as well, but you can start thinking outside yourself now. Look into professional designations, such as I have crime prevention. I have planning technician. There's many different things you can have, but don't be a collector. Like, people have collections of initials behind their name. Only have ones that are useful to your career. I mean, you could be a doctor of, I don't know, doctor of snails, right? What does that have to do with planning? Nothing. Great for you. You have initials behind your name. Makes you look arrogant and conceited even. So have useful designations behind your name. Give and receive mentorship. You can give mentorship to younger people, and you can receive mentorship from people who are a little bit more senior than you. Because as your career changes throughout your life, and as your life situation changes, you'll be faced with questions and problems which maybe you haven't foreseen, and it's good to have other people's thoughts on it while you make a decision. And obtain the right experience. After 2 years, you'll have the ability to move to whatever type of job you want, wherever you want, because you should have enough experience and continuity. But go to the type of job, like if you love transportation, go into a field where you're doing planning work for transportation aspects, such as Metrolinx or something like that, which is the big public community rail hub here in Canada or Ontario. If you love urban design, go to a firm that's very creative and doing up subdivisions or landscape architect or whatever. So get the experience that you really want to work in the profession. Another thing is, don't lose your professionalism just because you think you got it now. I said, I've worked here for 2 years. I get it. I know everything. I get it. I don't need to work that hard anymore. I don't need to study anymore. I don't need to take webinars. You need to take them until you're an expert in your field. You're still developing yourself. Seek out volunteer positions, extra or unique assignments from your boss. When I say volunteer, if you work for a government, it's hard to volunteer outside that because you have conflicts sometimes. But in your role, volunteer. Like I remember one time there was a job came up in my municipality. There was a lot of minor variances for zoning that were coming for fence heights. It was unbelievable how many variances the people were applying for. So I suggested, why don't I start a review committee, and we'll review all these things, and maybe our zoning is not right. Maybe everybody's actually applying for a variance because our zoning isn't the best. And through that committee, we went through everything, and we figured out, you know what, we need to do a housekeeping exercise to change our zoning bylaw to make it more palatable for the community. And therefore, we cut down on like 380 variances a year just because we changed the zoning, which everybody wanted. And I volunteered for that. And because of that, I was asked then to lead another committee for the entire city. And I was only, I was in like 1.5 years of experience. So by putting yourself out there, you'll be noticed and get those promotions and those advantages that others won't. The final thing is, work hard now, enjoy life later, or enjoy life now and work hard later. There's two choices. There's one aspect here. You have a straight line to your future. You put the work in now when you don't have a family, when you don't have obligations, when you don't have health issues or whatever. Spend the time, develop yourself, and it will pay off later. Or just plug into your work, worry about your social life, worry about your family, do all the other stuff besides work, and just plug in work and be just be a placeholder. And then when everybody else is being promoted, getting lots of money, getting opportunities, and you're not, and you sit there and wonder what's going on. You enjoyed life early and now you're working later. Okay, so again, work hard now, enjoy life later, or enjoy life now and work hard later. I prefer the former. Okay, what is it to be a professional planner? We're almost done this. Victoria, why don't you give us your thoughts?
Sure. So I can start us off with kind of the day to day. So we have, in our role at least, site visits occasionally, which are exciting. Then we have the even more exciting things: filing, organizing files, admin, cleaning up emails, reading all the emails from the day before that you never got to. We also meet with clients, municipalities, consultants. We often do project management, so we're often project coordinating a lot. So we're running the meetings, we're leading them with the municipality, with other consultants, with the client, writing reports, preparing contracts. So reports, planning justification reports, due diligence reports, feasibility, urban design briefs, presentations, preparing to represent clients at council and committee meetings. Then we have also coordination with other consultants. You wouldn't believe how many emails you can send in a day to the same person to go back and forth, engineers, architects, the works. So that's a typical day is, and like we were talking about before, we really want to hone in on the skills that we developed from university. So willingness and ability to learn. So the studiousness that we were talking about, that your environment is always changing. You're always working on a different project. You need to be able to adapt to different, for example, municipalities, because we do work all over Ontario. So we're not just focusing on the city of Toronto. We need to be able to adapt to different policies and structures, political structures, also like in terms of policy. Some places have regional plans, some places just have the local official plans. So we're making sure that we understand all the levels of policy, research skills, communication skills, presentation skills, and that kind of keys into having confidence in yourself, which we'll touch more on later, but having self-confidence to call people on the phone, because that's really nerve-wracking in the 21st century. Calling people on the phone and speaking to a live voice and not just speaking via email. That's a big thing that even when I started, Terrence would always tell me, did you follow up with the city? And I'd say, yeah, I sent an email. Nope, you gotta call them. I never wanted to call them. And then at a certain point, I wasn't even sending emails anymore. I was just constantly calling people because it's so much easier to get them on the phone than it is to have them respond to an email. Another really big thing is the ability to take constructive criticism. So university is a very sheltered, in a sense, sheltered life that you're living. You get marks, you get told what you did wrong and how you went wrong. When you're on the job, it's a little bit more difficult to take that criticism in a constructive way, because you think that you did something wrong and you feel like you failed. You didn't fail. You're being told how to do it differently or in a better way the next time. So being able to take constructive criticism, and instead of using that as a negative thing, to build off of that and improve off of that, is a skill that you need to be able to have, because that's going to stick with you. And eventually you're going to do it to other people. And there were times that I remember when Dorothy started that I would tell her, I'm not telling you this because you did something wrong. I'm telling you how to do it better for next time, so you learn for the next time. And that was also something that I was told by Terrence when I started, that I'm not criticizing you. I am, but don't take it in a bad way. Take it in, how can I improve next time? Because I'm only trying to make you better. So those are some skills and kind of how we apply them on a day to day.
Yeah, and I would add that.
Yeah, Dorothy,
Sorry.
talk about the difference between like the job and university.
Oh, well, I wanted to add first to your point on taking constructive criticism. I think it's really important because that's literally your job. When you're in school, you can have a lot more freedom, I guess, with where you want to take your projects, but in the industry, you have an assignment. You have a client who wants specific things, and you know, they're your client. You got to listen to what they want. So a lot of times you'll get constructive criticism from them, or you might get constructive criticism from your peers. And especially when you're a new planner, you have to be willing to listen to the people ahead of you.
And your client is always right until your boss tells you they're not.
Yes, exactly.
Um, Thank you, Dorothy. You want to talk about the job compared to university, Dorothy?
Yeah, so I think I did touch on this a little bit earlier on uh how different it can be, which the biggest difference that I found again was going from group work to individual work, independent work. When you're in university, there's a lot of group work because you have to learn how to collaborate with other people, but everyone has a defined role or task to complete. And when you're on the job, you might have to take all of those roles, and you're going to be responsible for all of those. You're going to be held accountable for all of those. And this might mean that you're going to be taking the entire planning application process from the initial concept all the way to improve approvals. And that includes doing your due diligence to make sure you know what you're talking about, consulting with way more people than you could imagine when you're in school, because in school, when we're doing studio projects, the most amount of people that we would talk to would be our clients. But on the job, you have a lot more people to be talking to, a lot more things to consider, and yeah, a lot more things to consider. And again, at some point, you're going to be writing justification reports all alone. And that's why I found the site planning elective so helpful, because it challenged me to address every aspect independently. And I think we know that justification reports can be pretty long. So you need to know how to address each section. And another thing is you just have to keep in mind that you need to be a little more vigilant, because you're not being constantly monitored or graded anymore. Your mistakes have much bigger impacts than a bad grade, especially
You
on
get fired if you
private.
don't.
Yeah. There's quite big consequences to mistakes sometimes. You're not just failing a class anymore.
Okay, and that kind of brings me into what type of different jobs are there out there for graduates. Um, as a planning degree, it's a great degree because you learn how to think in planning, how to critically think. Rational comprehensive model can be used pretty much any profession, as well as personally. Um, so you have a great education behind you if you graduate. As a planner, though, there are many different fields you can get into, and it really depends on what you're interested in. When you work for let me put it in perspective here. Planning the center of a wheel, that's great. That's a city planner, is the center of a wheel. The county planner is a little bit further out of the spoke of the center of the wheel. And then the offshoots, there's transportation planning, there's education planning, there's conservation planning, there's ministry planning, there's Niagara Escarpment planning, things that are not the center of the hub, but are related to planning, and that's the public sector. You can get a job there. Typically, they pay good wages. Sometimes they're unionized. Sometimes you get good benefits. But I don't think they're the best area to start a career in, because if they're bigger municipalities, or specialized municipalities, you're in a silo and you only learn what's in that silo. If it's a mid-size or a small municipality, you'll be learning a lot more because they'll ask you to do a lot more because you're not such a siloed department. But to have the experience and the breadth of knowledge, in my opinion, it's always best to work private sector first and then go into public sector, because you can take that real life experience about development and the pressures of development and what needs to be done with development, and apply it to being a municipal planner, the gatekeeper of the planning process, and say, this is what needs to be done. I know what needs to be done. I see you're working at it. We'll move things ahead. Same as a policy planner. My belief is you should be a development planner for at least 10 years before you move into policy work. How can you create policy for development when you've never worked in development? I mean, you theoretically understand how it works, but you've never actually applied it. So to be a good policy planner, in my opinion, you should be a development planner first. In the private sector, same thing goes. You work for a planning office, you're a planner, you're the center of the universe. You work for a law firm, you're a planner, you're just a number. You're a support worker for the lawyers. Engineering firm, same thing. Landscape architecture, construction, real estate. You are a support worker for the people who are running the business. And that's a great job and it's a great role. It's a very important role. But if you want to be the center of the universe in your own career, planning department or planning firm is where you want to be from the private sector point of view. All these things work together. So private and public and private, they all work together. So they're interchangeable. To say that, if you have municipal experience, it's easier to get a municipal job. If you have municipal experience, unless you're well-to-do in your career, sometimes it's difficult to get a equivalent private sector job. They want you to start at the bottom because, again, a lot of people in municipal life are siloed, don't have that breadth of knowledge. But if you started private sector and you can show your experience and breadth of knowledge to the public sector, they would love you because they want firsthand knowledge of their own policies that you applied. Personally, I think private sector again is the best career point to start in a planning firm. Then switch over to public sector if that's the role you want to take. Some people, it's a different environment. I'll give you an example too. I worked for a ministry for a summer job one time, and not my boss, but my staff pulled me aside and they said, "Look, Terrence, you're working too fast. You're working too good. You're doing too much work. You're making us look bad. So please slow down." And that was I was shocked. I was like, what? Like, I'm doing a good job and you're telling me not to do a good job? And not everywhere, but oftentimes that's the atmosphere that you're going into in the public sector. People are guaranteed jobs, people have salaries, people have time off, people have sick time, whatever, work from home. It's a little bit cushy and it's not a good work ethic, in my opinion. And you don't learn is what you need to learn to be a good planner. But to say that, some people love working in municipal life, and there are really good municipal planners out there as well that take that initiative and problem solve. In my experience, so they're few and far between. And even planners who work for municipality feel that they do this could do it more effectively if they had some private sector experience. Let me see. I'm just looking over my notes here. Anything else I want to talk about? Victoria or Dorothy, do you have anything else you'd like to talk about in the job market before we get into, Victoria, your experience working abroad and how you went about doing that?
On my end, no. I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay. So we have a unique, so as you know, or you can tell, Victoria used to work for me. She doesn't work for me anymore. She's works abroad now in Italy. So when I was going through the system too, there was opportunities to work abroad in the United States and that. Now with the current political climate, I don't know if that's the same, but people can work in Europe or whatever. So tell us about how you got there and what you're doing there and what opportunities are there for other planners graduating.
So I'm not going to speak for everybody's working abroad experience because it's different for everybody. So I've been working at my company for about 5 months at this point, and I'm working for an international development firm here in Rome. I work in the international division because they have a general buildings for domestic projects, and I'm working in the international division. So one of the pros is that I don't necessarily need Italian, but I do need English because all of the clients that we interact with on a daily basis speak English, as does everybody in my department. So one of the most frustrating challenges is it takes a long time to find a job. So the job that I have right now, I actually applied for at this point almost a year and a half ago. And I heard back a year after I applied for the very first time. And a lot of the times I was being rejected because I wasn't actually in the country. So the number one hardest thing in that sense is actually securing a job when you're not located in the country, because my job isn't a visa sponsored job. That's another thing too, that not all companies want to sponsor you and go through that process of giving you a work visa or a work permit, because it's lawyers, it's time, and they could easily hire somebody who is an international individual but living in the city that they're in, or they'll just hire somebody who lives, works their whole life there. So there are some pros and cons. So I was lucky enough that I do have a working knowledge of Italian, but my job is strictly English. You're immersed in a new culture and a new work environment, so you have to get used to different hierarchies and how things work. For example, my company is entirely partner owned, so it's employee owned. And the way that works is you would think that if somebody's a partner, that they're, high up, they're in their own office, they have all of these perks. And I sit beside three of the partners. They work exactly right next to me, which is wild because I've never heard of anything like that in Toronto. If you're working at a big firm, the partners have their own office and they're behind closed doors and you can't access them. And I can access them every single day. So that's when I'm saying hierarchies, that's what I'm referring to, is that you don't even know that the person you're sitting right beside owns part of the company, which is, for me, it's crazy. As an international developer at an international firm, you have the opportunity to work on really impactful projects on an international scale, not just on a local scale, which is also really, really cool. And you become immersed in a new work-life balance. So you have new norms, you have rules of the workplace and how things kind of work there. And when you're talking about breaks and lunch and when you start and when you finish and what's normal for like a typical work day. So here it's 9 to 6 is very typical. But if I go to the office at 9 a.m., it's empty until 9:30, 9:45. That's when it starts to fill up. But technically our start time is 9 a.m. There are also some cons as a Canadian working abroad. Interpreting policy in a lot of different countries is very different because a lot of the times you're also working with translating those policies half the time, and then you're interpreting them, but you don't know how the other countries interpret them. You know how you, working in your own country, would interpret a certain policy, and then you have to reach out to somebody there to help you interpret it. And that, with the language barrier, can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. And sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming because you're not familiar with these places and how they work and who to contact and where to go. Whereas when I was working in Toronto and Ontario, I had contacts almost at every municipality that I could reach out to if I needed help. Another thing just to be aware of, which isn't a huge thing for some people, but you do take a pretty significant salary cut. It's just it's a different economic climate, and you just need to be okay with that. So that's one thing that you have to be familiar with. Also, you need to be familiar with different kinds of contracts and tax regimes. And for example, I do all the invoicing because I work as a collaborator. So I've never had to invoice for my hours in my life. I always had an accounting team at whatever company I was working at, and I would get my paycheck biweekly. Here it's monthly, so you get paid once a month. And if you don't invoice for that month, you don't get paid because it's your responsibility to send the invoice. It's not their responsibility to check with you of where the invoice is and if you got paid or not. That's solely your responsibility. So although it seems very glamorous and it's very romanticized sometimes, it can be very beneficial if you're well prepared for it. So would I recommend doing it right out of school? Now that I've experienced it, probably not, because I feel like you need to establish a foundation where you live, where you graduated from. If you were studying abroad and you love it so much and you want to work in whatever city you were studying in, absolutely. But you have to note that also entry-level jobs, internships, apprenticeships in Europe specifically are unpaid. So if you're doing any kind of entry-level work here, you're not really getting paid at all. And even entry level, you're not really getting paid that much. You want to establish yourself where you lived, where you graduated. Because if I didn't have all the experience to back me up, I wouldn't be getting the salary or hold the position that I have now. So it's really important to establish your background, also your interests. Because if you think that you're interested in one thing, at least you have time. For example, I had time when I was in Toronto to figure out what I wanted to do. If I wanted land use, if I wanted to go into private sector or public sector, I had the opportunity. If I moved abroad and I kind of put all my eggs in one basket and said, this is what I think I like to do, it may have been something very different. Because what if I didn't like it? And now I'm in this position where I'm on the other side of the world. So I think that's also very important takeaway. So it's better to establish your passion and your interests before you take them on another level entirely.
Thank you, Victoria. That was great information for, I mean, even I was considering going to Indonesia when I was getting out of school. I actually had an offer to work for United Nations. I was going to go to Estonia and work for them. Never worked out. But interesting that these things are available to planners and to understand what's involved with them, you know, the trials and tribulations of them. Thank you, everybody, or both of you, for collaborating with me. And again, we offer this, I guess, as a service, a public service for students in planning, wherever you may be in the world, to give you an idea of what it's like to be a planner, things that they don't teach in school, things that you need to know, little bits of advice that could be useful for you, things that I wish, and perhaps you guys wish that you had known going in or coming out of school. And hopefully you guys will find it useful. And all I can say is stay active in your field, whether you're in school or not. Develop your public speaking skills. Think outside the box in terms of your solution and problem solving skills. And again, hopefully this is useful to you. We don't mind spending the time that it takes to do this so that you can benefit later. All right, thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Dorothy, for your insight and knowledge. Thank you for your time as well. And thank you, everybody, for watching this. Hopefully you found it useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.